In today's episode of Know Your Major podcast series, we have with us Mr. Anirudh Modi. Hi, Anirudh. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
Let's start, and let's start with your introduction. Why don't you help us understand a little bit more about where did you do your schooling, then your college, what major, which year? Let's walk us through
Right,
the journey so far.
right. So as he mentioned, right, I'm Anirudh Modi, and then I'm from Bangalore, right? So I'm born in Mumbai, and I've studied in Bangalore obviously all my life. And most of you might know Inventure Academy as the IGCSE and A level school, right, in Bangalore. So I used to study at Inventure Academy, and prior to that, I used to study at Shishu Griha, which used to be ICSE school. So then again, there was a huge shift when I shifted from the ICSE background to a IGCSE background. And there was a huge debate that came in as to whether that was the right decision and whether I should have continued with maybe a CBSE background. But after all, I think that considering major factors of where I want to see myself in the future and university, the decision to switch to IGCSE from ICSE was quite smooth despite other frictions that people said in terms of adjusting to the course curriculum. And then the IGCSE to the A level switch also was seamless in Inventure. And that's how I saw myself being in Inventure for the last 8 years of my schooling. And I study currently economics and finance at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm a penultimate year student. And I happen to graduate in 2025. And from Inventure, I graduated at the batch of 2021. So that's a bit of my background in terms of my schooling.
Amazing. And since you spoke about that very important question, right? So you did in the beginning in ICSE and then moved to an IGCSE curriculum.
That's right.
In the hindsight, do you think that was the right call you took? I know, there's a big question about whether parents should shift their child to IGCSE, to IB, to A
Right.
levels. Is there an advantage to
That's
go
right.
to international curriculum? What do you think about it?
Yeah, so this was a major question also. The reason I shifted obviously was some personal reasons at that point of time, right? And I saw myself getting more opportunities, maybe from a school like Inventure or an international school that had struck a balance, I would say, between the extracurriculars and the academics, right? So when it came into ICSE, I think that there was this entire notion of it being too academic oriented, right? And as an individual, I wasn't too academic oriented at that point of my career and stage of life. So I think that a background that gave me a seamless blend of extracurricular sports and the ability to like gain vital life skills, I think which Inventure amazingly does through like the extracurricular programs. That's the reason I switched to IGCSE. And I think now if you ask me if it was the right decision, I would say it was the perfect decision, and that's where I am today because of the school and the curriculum, right? So I think that ICSE, there was definitely more of like the academic touch, like I said, where it's more of a rhythmic oriented course where there's not too much of application. But when you look at the IGCSE and A level curriculum, I could really apply the knowledge in different settings through maybe like a group project when we had to work in school, right? Or in presentations. So that was something I could also see in the past papers, right? So when I solved past papers, it was more of like, you need to like come up with like a diagram, and it's not only about like you getting the right answer, it's more about like how you explain a concept. But whereas in the ICSE way, it was more of the notion that you have to get these points to be awarded a mark, right? So I guess it's just a balance of what type of educational background you seek and where you see yourself applying that knowledge. But I wanted more of a practical background, right? And where I could apply and understand where my knowledge is being used, and thus the choice of IGCSE and A levels.
Got it. Great. Thanks. So I think my next question might not be so relevant to you, but I will still, ask you this question.
Right.
So when you entered college, you had a specific major in mind, or did you decide later on?
Right. So just to boil down on my personal background, right? So I come from a three-generation family business, actually, which has roots in like Sri Lanka and in India. So we've been into the business sector for quite a long time. So considering that aspect, and then also the aspect that a lot of my friends wanted to do investment banking and finance, and I was tempted by that. Obviously, you know that the financial aspect of that career stands at a good point, right? So that was one of my motives as well, and maybe just to experience how it is to be in that rigorous industry. But ultimately I would say that yeah, my career choice was hinged on these factors, right? And then I decided to work backwards towards my course selection at university and even the choices at school, right? So if you ask me how my choices of subjects came about at school, it was majorly through understanding where I see myself in the future. And then also, I think it was about discussions with friends. So I think some of the aspects which many people say is that friends could dilute your I would say majority of your thinking at times by giving you diverse opinions, right? Or they say that when you're like choosing subjects or like choosing your life goals, maybe it's better to focus with your parents' objectives, right? Or your family objectives. But I'd say maybe consider a holistic point of view, because initially I went into university thinking investment banking and finance is where I want to go. But then when you reflect on your personal background, maybe you might have a family business, right? Or you have seen your family struggle in a certain area, but you want to take it up from there. And I've seen that personally, and I just want to develop on the business. So hence, therefore, there was also a change in my degree, just to add on. From I entered university with a business and economics course, but then the business side of things, again, because I wanted to go into banking, didn't seem relevant. But now I've reverted back to the course in my third year, right? So again, like you see, there's a drastic shift that can come about while at university as well. But I think it's a mix of different factors like your personal background, your goals ultimately, and where you see yourself a couple of years down the line.
So you touched upon very interesting thing, right? And you are probably one of the very few people who we will be calling on this podcast who are coming from UK. And as much as just for our audience sake, when you get into UK,
Right,
very similar to the Indian education system, or we follow British
right.
education system. You
That's
get
right.
into a college with a specific major in mind, and then you stick
Right.
major. But you obviously
That's
spoke
right.
about shifting your major slightly. I just wanted to
Right.
ask a little bit more. How did that really happen?
Right. So I think that you're right, right? And in the US, you can go with an undecided and then choose your path accordingly, right? So there's
Yeah.
more flexibility. So many people go that path. But again, like for students who are thinking whether I should go US or UK just because of that, I would say that the UK does give you a lot of flexibility. So for instance, in Edinburgh, we have a system where you can try out courses. You don't need to take the exams, but you can sit on courses which you would probably like to do as an add-on. So I could take maybe 120 credits over the year, but I could take like another 40 credits and just audit the course, for instance. So there's always that fine balance where you can go the extra mile, but learn additional. That's on you. So I would say that the UK does give you flexibility in that as well, but maybe it's more of like the notion that, yeah, you go in with a decided major, but you need to like speak to the advisor after all, and then maybe it's your university who agrees upon your grades, right? So it was a hard call, because for me it was like whether my grades would be up to that point, and there were certain requirements for me in my second year I had to attain to move on to that. So yes, you're right that when it comes to the UK system, it's mostly that you choose a major and graduate in the final year with that. But there is flexibility to some extent that comes in when you speak to your university. But again, I think that's based on the requirements and how you present it to them.
Got it. Understood. I think that'll be super helpful for our audience. Let's get into the major, right? How did you go about selecting your college major? Were there specific experiences or some influences that played a significant role in your decision? And I know you spoke about you spoke about family background. I think that's a very unique
Right,
point that I've hearing today from you, that you
right,
need to look at your family background and see if there's a family business which is already there,
right.
are there some missing pieces that you want to come back and
Exactly.
tackle that and take that forward. So you spoke about that. I think the second important thing that you also spoke about is how your friends could also be a great influence
Right, right.
in the positive way. We always see that sometimes positive,
That's true.
most of the time negative, but you're saying
True,
there is some positive affirmations as well.
true.
Are there any other influences or instances that made you feel that economics and finance is going to be the right major for you?
Right. So, when I went into university before actually choosing my major, I also looked at the US and Canada, right? So, when it came to locations, what I did was that I decided first to go with an approach of choose my location, right? Then I decided that, okay, once the location is chosen, it's also the ranking that comes in. But the ranking is not the only aspect. So, that was one factor that I looked at. So, this was my filtration of universities, right? And my major. Then, when it came to choosing the major, like you said, there were different factors. One was obviously my family background, then the friends. The third thing is I would say go to like taster sessions at universities. So, for instance, I took up a University of Bristol taster lecture. And with that, I was able to understand how the economics at a University of Bristol would look like. So that was offered during the COVID period because there was no open days that you could really attend in person. Then for me, since I was the COVID batch, I couldn't really visit the UK event, which I had planned on my books to confirm my university choices. So I would say majorly just speak to students in the past who have been at the university. So for instance, I connected over LinkedIn with some of the students, and even through the chat you have online at the university pages. So I would say that was a major influence because I understood how they felt about the courses, the difficulty of the courses, ultimately where they saw themselves. So, for instance, I'd spoken to someone at UCL who was doing a data management course, which I had applied for, but he said that the outcome that he expected from the course wasn't up to the point, right? And there were certain factors that the course didn't deliver as promised, and hence he had switched his course actually to an economics and finance course, just like what I'm doing at this point of time, right? So I think that again, like there was these open days and like the chat sessions that you have with students come into a great play. Maybe when you're finalizing the universities. And apart from that, also, I think that these taster lectures are definitely something that you should do. I don't think many people speak about it, but there are taster lectures offered. And also, I'd connected with some of the professors. So, what I did is over LinkedIn, I just searched up some like economics professors and then I shot them an email over LinkedIn messages. And then I asked them if I could like maybe read up on some of their work because I did believe that ultimately your mandatory readings at university are somehow linked to the professors and like what they are also ultimately focusing on, right? So I decided to do that. And then I realized that, yeah, economics and finance is where I see myself, right? So these are some unique aspects of how I chose my course, right? So I don't know if a lot of people do this, but I've done it this way. And then apart from that, for economics and finance, I think I'd done a research paper on COVID and like the economic impact of COVID on societies. And then I had my own economics website that I had published. So there was a lot of research oriented background that I wanted to go into. Hence, I chose economics being obviously like you can go into consulting and then you can get into the equity research aspect and stuff. So those fields were something I looked at initially, and therefore I chose economics as my major.
Great. So I think you added a couple of additional points. I think you said, taster sessions.
Right.
Could be open days at this point of time.
Right. Right.
Write to professors, talk to the people, talk to students who are currently pursuing this major, and that's one of the goal of doing this entire podcast.
Right. And I think, sorry to cut you, but an additional thing is if you can really visit with your parents the universities, I would say go. So, for instance, for me, I went to Singapore because there was always that notion that is Singapore really, you know, is it going to fit into my background? While it's so close to India, I could just frequently travel about, but
right.
Is it really going to add value after I pay so much for my education, right? So I went into the Singapore Management University in NUS, but I saw that, for instance, the students were too academically focused, and that was not something that I liked, whereas extracurriculars took a back seat. So again, walking into universities and just meeting even the staff over there and like having a word with students maybe on campus is something that I did with my parents, right, prior to COVID. And that really made me, for instance, choose that, okay, Singapore is not something that I would look at for my university. So then again, that's another point that I'd add as to how you can go about choosing.
So great. I think great additional points that you have given to us. Let's talk about the college experience, right? So would you like to share a bit about your like overall college experience related to your major so far? How's it going so far? Is it as per expectation?
I came in with an objective that business and economics, but then it's completely shifted, right, to economics and finance. And there has to be a reason for that. So again, at university, I would say many people come in and like first year and second year, I would definitely say that make as many connections as you can, right? Your grades ultimately do not have a high weightage towards your degree, right? So while you definitely do focus on your grades, I'm not saying you do not, but you use the first and second year as a point where you make as many connections as you can, get involved in societies. So for instance, I took up leadership roles at societies through initiatives like director of events, through freshers representative. So when you come about with different leadership experiences, again, it's adding value to your own CV, I would say, also to your development, right? And also you make connections in that area, right? But more so, I would say that do that in your first years when it's not really counted. And then third and fourth year when it's counted, focus on your academics, which is what I see many people doing. Then you have obviously your dissertation, right? So a serious mindset comes into the final years, but don't overburn yourself, right? So what I tend to like do, and most of my friends tend to do, is that we balance it with some amount of sports and going out. So also, like in your third and fourth year, you would get into like your internships for your graduate roles and then your summer internships. So that's a major factor. So I'd say actually pre-plan it. So there's obviously, if you come to the UK, there's a spring week concept, then your summer internship, and then your graduate internships, right? So I don't know if I'm going to get into these three, if you would want me to speak about them, but these three are a major factor also in your university life you'll have to consider. So going forward, I would say to all students, think about these as well when you come into university and plan them over your years, is what I would say. But so far, so good. University is going well for me. And I think that when it comes to like the outcomes that the course has delivered exceptionally, right? Maybe I could have asked for a better teaching style in terms of more in-person contact, right? So in my first year, while there was a bit of the COVID aspect going on, there was a lack of like the in-person. So an entire year went with me just traveling back to India and coming back and then adjusting into the non-COVID aspect in second year. But I think more of a personalized approach would have obviously made me make a few more friends than I have right now.
Right, right. Got it. Now let's take it to the career goals, right? So did you have
Right.
specific career goals in mind when you were selecting your major? Or
Right.
and do you see your college major now aligning with your career aspirations at this point of time?
Right. So when I went into university, obviously, as I mentioned, I wanted to go into investment banking or consulting, right? So that's how I chose my subjects at high school, and then obviously chose certain courses. Like for instance, I chose financial econometrics, right? Or like financial markets. So I think even the course selection at university comes about to some extent with what you want to align your goals to. So you wouldn't obviously arbitrarily choose any course at university and then say, oh, the course didn't deliver. But obviously it wouldn't have delivered if you chose the wrong subjects, right? So
Right.
I would say that keep your final career goal in mind when choosing your subjects. And for me, yes, investment banking was something that I was leaning towards the first 2 years. But an interesting story is that when I changed my major, right, and when I came back at the end of year two to the family business, I realized that investment banking and consulting again is not something I want to do. So then, as I said, there may be cases where you go in with like a career goal which you see yourself taking for any reason, right? You might enter university with that, but then there's a complete shift. And for me, I would say all my efforts in year one and year two and all the connections I made were towards like maybe professors and like the industry experts through conferences that happened at university for the finance and banking field, right? So I've developed connections on those and even through investment experiences at like, for instance, the university's finance club and investment banking committee and stuff. But ultimately that's not what I wanted to do. But then again, I would say that don't disappoint yourself or say that, oh, this is like something that was a setback for me. There could be changes, right? And when the changes come about, I said that I would accept it, right? And maybe put all my efforts now towards understanding what I would want to do for a master's. So I changed my approach rather and said that while I did focus on the finance aspect in the first 2 years, now I got to focus on maybe the business aspect. So then again, my courses that I've selected in third and fourth year have changed drastically towards my career goals. So
Got it.
how I entered uni and how I exit uni has been for me a unique case because it's changed entirely my career aspirations.
Nice. And interesting enough to know that it is possible to do that in UK as well. Obviously, it's an extra
Right.
effort. You have to go that
True.
extra mile. You need to get those credits. You need to get those
Right.
scores. But it is in some way possible to
It is
do.
definitely possible.
Good
Right.
to know. Good to know. Great. And now let's go back and talk about those high school students who are currently sitting in at home or
Right.
in grade 9, 10. Think about,
Right.
put yourself in those shoes and think about it. What advice would you give to these high school students who are trying to figure out the college major for themselves, right? Is there a process that you followed? Is there a methodology that you would advise them, recommend them that they should follow?
Right. So in ninth and 10th grade, right, I think it's many people say it's still an early part of your career, right? But what I did tend to do is that since you're on IGCSE, you have obviously your 8 subjects that you can take in, right?
Right.
And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can choose your 8 subjects, right, in different categories.
Correct.
So I would say that you choose maybe like a subject, play around with your subjects in a way that you keep your options open, right? So interestingly, I wanted to do even engineering initially when I was in ninth and 10th grade. So I
Right.
kept physics, economics, and then chemistry and business studies. So obviously the blend of engineering possibility, PCMB, and your economics business studies, right? So
Got it.
those five, and then my three compulsory. So I think that again, like that is a unique aspect that yeah, you can keep two career goals, right? Keep your risks diverse. So you don't need to put all your eggs in one basket by saying that, okay, in ninth and 10th grade, since I'm still at a early stage of my life and I'm still choosing my IGCSE subjects, maybe you would want to go in with an open minded approach. So I'd say play around with your subjects. Don't just put all your eggs in one basket and say, okay, finance or economics, or maybe psychology is where I see myself, right? Rather, maybe experiment, take a subject that might not even interest you, right? But then challenge yourself that, oh, maybe that is something that could potentially be interesting. But that again, do in your ninth and 10th grade. Then what I did is that yeah, I did understand that, okay, physics, chemistry, biology is not my thing. So after 10th grade, I dropped chemistry and biology, but still kept the physics aspect. And then I took economics, maths, right, and accounting in 11th and 12th grade over AS and A levels. So then I think you go into more of like a concentrated approach that I see myself liking these subjects. So ninth and 10th, experiment, like I said, understand what you really like in terms of your subjects, use that to get in your subjects in AS and A levels. And then I would say the right time to apply to universities and like understand your career goals would be 11th grade or end of 10th grade in your summer. So what I did is end of 10th grade and summer, I came out with a tracker where I understood that UK, US, Canada, different geographical regions. And that's when I planned my visits to Singapore, like I said, to understand which location I would come down to. So I think 10th grade summer, if you break it down, would be a good time to understand where do you see yourself in the world, right? So where do you want to really head to? Then in 11th and 12th grade, obviously based on your ninth and 10th grade likings, you would have already chosen your subject. So that is ticked off the box. And then ideally, you would also have your location to some extent confirmed after that summer. Then obviously now comes the choices of your subjects. But 11th and 12th grade, you would have already chosen a specific amount of subjects. So the amount of deviation you have would be minimal, right? Because you would have chosen the next amount. So after you choose those subjects, I would say that in 11th grade, research about the courses. So so like for instance, in UK, you would ask me that why did you choose Edinburgh, right? You could have chosen maybe where London, where many of the students go to London saying, oh, it's a fabulous city, great job opportunities. But then again, I would say this comes down to your location where you need to choose where you see yourself comfortable. So personality was another big important trait for me. Then I spoke to my parents. Obviously, parents believe that obviously the safety in London is one aspect you need to look into. So that was the demographics. Even so, there are different factors you can look into, right? But I took opinions even from my teachers and friends, right? So, like I mentioned, just speak to them on why they chose Canada, for instance, because all my high school friends are in Canada, but I'm the only one who's in UK, right? So, why did everyone go that path and not in terms of sticking to the UK? So, maybe speak to your friends over coffee and understand why they're going that path, so that you're not constrained in your approach, right? And then in start of 11th grade, I'd say firm your location, right? Your subjects would be firm. And then when it comes to your career goals, 11th and 12th grade, I would say is when you need to, I would say don't firm your career goal, right? Like, because in university, you still have 4 years where you can ultimately change based on your summer internships and spring weeks. But try to understand where you see yourself going, because that's when you choose your university course also. So that's on a holistic way how I chose my location and my career goals.
Just a quick reflection, right? Is there anything else
Right.
you would have done differently in this entire process of selecting your major? In the hindsight, obviously now, and if yes, what would that be?
Right. So I think that when if I had to like choose a different major, I think that the process went quite smooth. But for me personally, what I did is during COVID, since it was like my predicted grades, right, that went in, obviously there was that fear that since I think that COVID batch speaks differently from the non-COVID batch that is there right now. But for me, majority of my AS and A level schooling was online, right? And then I wasn't in touch for 2 years with any of the students. And then we had to graduate online. So it was entirely COVID driven. But diversification of my risk was a main thing. So when I applied to 5 of the UK universities, I had two extremely low grade universities and then three of the best ranking, right? So I think I had the UCL, LSE, then I had the Edinburgh, Manchester, and then I had, if I'm not mistaken, Strathclyde, which is unknown of, right? But I would say that even when you choose your universities, choose in a way that, right, you go into an exam which you're completely confident of getting maybe an A star and an A, but have the notion that you could potentially get a B or a C. So the worst case outcome is something that I always looked at, right? So in COVID, I knew that while I could be predicted an A star based on my performance, there's a chance maybe I would get a B, right? If stuff goes
Right.
wrong. So I kept university rankings and also the university choices based on the courses that would let me get in with like maybe a ABB or a BBB. So that's how I chose my 5 university choices. So again, that's a good process, I would say. But if you ask me at that point of time, I repent that I chose maybe Strathclyde. I could have chosen an Oxford or a Cambridge with my grades, right? So maybe right now for the batch, I would say keep a risk that is well balanced, but also keep your stretch goals. So if you really think you can achieve an Oxford or Cambridge, don't be constrained in your approach. Go for it, right? Like aim a bit high, but keep keep your risks balanced at the same time, is what I would say. And that is something I repent on, but that's part of the deal, right? So
Got it. Got it. But nothing in the process. So this is in the process of selection of university, but nothing in the process of
it's
major.
no major. I was just concentrated with my subjects, and I think it was seamless that I really knew where I was heading, right?
Yeah.
But then there was a change in my circumstance during uni, but
Yeah.
fair enough that I knew where I was headed, so that was not a problem. But I think more so, I would say major is one aspect, but the university course selection is definitely another factor that you really need to look into, right? So
No, great. I think sounds good. And okay, let's talk about the final thoughts here, right? Is there anything else that
sure.
you'd like to advise to a high school student who is looking to go outside of India to pursue their undergrad?
Definitely, definitely. So I think that do not focus only on your academics, right? So I think a lot of notion in India is that, but I think many of the parents or whoever might be listening to this podcast as the audience, right? I feel that a lot of them say that, okay, yes, education is the main thing in Indian society. That is definitely a thing. And it's a fair enough opinion that your education needs to be placed at an important scale. But I would say that when it comes to look at your whole background, right? Like I would say you need to develop on your personality as an individual as well. So you don't want to go into uni being too academically oriented and then you like lack maybe like a social aspect, right, to your life. When you really want to make your connections in the first 2 years, right? Like I mentioned. So take up as many opportunities as you can at high school. So, for instance, I took up a lot of leadership roles as student body captain, right? And then I was on the athletics team at high school, right? And then I took part in sports days and any of the events that Inventure offered me. So be open minded. Do not let go of an opportunity. And I would say oh yes, another important factor of choosing your course was also that for me, I did an internship while I was at high school. So this is a major factor, right? So I forgot to touch upon that. So do an internship maybe in your 11th and 12th grade. You don't want to do it too early into your ninth and 10th grade. Maybe do it 11th and 12th when you're really going to initially choose your course, right? So try to understand maybe through one or two internships, is that what I see myself doing? So I did maybe through I wanted to understand whether ESG, for instance, and economics is of interest to me because I thought ESG is the next big thing, right? So
Right.
I did thought that I should work for like an NGO and they were making an environmental impact. So that was really not something that I liked. So then I backed out of it. But then when I was at high school, I went into product development and finance with a Belgian firm. And then I realized that, okay, yeah, that is something that maybe might tick me. So then I chose accounting, economics, and the subjects I did choose at A levels, physics as well, right? So again, your subject choices also come about with internships. So internships, leadership roles, then even MUNs, I think are big things while at school. So take up that. I think your negotiation skills come about to a good extent. And the fact that I can communicate this well also came about through MUN, because you meet people from so many different parts of the world, right? And that made it easy when I came into uni, that I could socialize with different people, because I traveled to, for instance, China for an MUN, or like to Hyderabad for an MUN. So when you network with different people, you really understand at an earlier point of time how it would potentially be. So that is another opinion that I carry. And then apart from that, I would say that just be open minded, right? Don't constrain yourself saying that I want to enter a certain field. Speak to maybe even in your family different people who are there, shadow them if you can. So maybe have a shadow opportunity where you can work with them, and do not say that you want to get paid work, right? At that point of time, I would say even if it's unpaid, just take it, but like grasp that shadow opportunity to understand how it is in a life of like that individual professionally. So that's what I would say at this point of time for any ninth or 10th grader.
No, amazing. I think you've touched upon, a couple of important aspects, right? And internship is very, very important aspect,
Right.
experiential learning. I was, doing the podcast with another student.
Definitely.
He said the exactly same thing, saying that, he did one of the internship in one of the firm, and that's where he realized that he wants to do a particular thing.
Right.
So I think
Right.
that is very, very powerful. You also spoke about the research paper that you write. I think that also is super important.
Right.
When you are trying to write a research paper, I think you have to go deep into a subject. And when you're going deep
Exactly.
into a subject, it also
You click
helps you
with it.
realize whether are you enjoying this aspect or you're not liking
True.
the aspect, right? Because
True.
nobody can push you to write a research paper if you
Definitely.
don't like it, right? I think those
Definitely.
are a couple of great pointers, Anirudh, you have given. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Anirudh. Thanks for
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Appreciate it.
sure this will be super helpful for the audience. Thank you. Thanks once again.
Thank you so much.